I'm going to start from the beginning. I mean, the way that you came in touch with Botafogo when Tyro contacted you through LinkedIn. And I mean, I've been meaning to ask you, how does a guy like you, who has been an investor in multiple markets and had businesses in Hollywood and Florida, why would you listen to a pitch made by two Brazilians you never heard about? And what made you stop and, okay, let's listen to what those guys have to say?
I think this answer you could ask of many people in a similar situation, whether business people or investors. These opportunities happen because somebody brings you an idea, maybe God brings you an idea, and an idea comes to you exactly at the time that you're open for it. Many emails come to me and messages on LinkedIn in particular, and it's really not that mysterious. You flip through all of them and you end up clicking the one that appeals to you based on something that you may be open to at the time. So I'm sure Tyro did not understand my journey in football, that it started back in 2005. And I was starting an academy to help South American kids that are here in the United States without immigration papers, to help them use their football to get into university. And I ran that academy as a side project from 2005 to 2012. And then I had a business failure in 2012 where the business was doing quite well. And similar to these problems you get into with private credit people, like private lenders, you end up in these, technical environments where they have more leverage or you have more leverage. And before you know it, this great business, this multiple Academy Award-winning business, it continued to move on and become quite valuable. But the ownership fight that happened ended up leaving me in a really bad spot. So I was without a job for immediately in 2012. The thing that I was most excited about while I was trying to get another job was this academy I was running. I couldn't stop working with these kids. And, all my great friends had gone away when my wealth looked questionable. And suddenly I was driving the bus, taking these kids to tournaments. It was almost my full-time job as I was figuring out what I would do next. So several years later, we find ourselves in 2018. My new business is doing well. The money is coming back. All my fake friends wanted to come back, but I didn't really want that life to return. So I stayed loyal to this academy and I kept driving the bus and kept taking them to tournaments. When Fubo happened, this business that, was a soccer streaming company, it ended up being worth several $billion. Then I really had a bunch of people coming back into my life that wanted a piece of me again. And I had already been through that. I knew that was fake. And I really loved this football thing. And so what I'd learned is that, the best players in the world are often unseen, undiscovered, or they don't have the money to get an agent, get a lawyer, get a plane ticket to go to a trial, or maybe they don't even have the right nutrition or food, or maybe their parents can't help them. So that knowledge of the talent around the world, my desire to see the best players, in the United States be seen, or the best players in South America be seen. Then I get this email from this guy, Tyro, who's telling me I should look at Brazil. My brother's married to a Brazilian. I'm surrounded by Brazilians. Our club, FC Florida Academy, was started through a relationship with a Brazilian family. And I opened it up and I read it. And I'm sorry that's a long answer, but the right ideas find the right people when their minds and hearts are open, and then neat things can happen. And that's how this happened.
And did you always have, because I know it's a stereotype that Americans don't like soccer or soccer is not that popular in America. Did you always have an interest in soccer? Was it something that you followed since you were young, or when did that start? Why soccer? Why did you choose to get into? Was it just from a business perspective, or did you enjoy the sport particularly?
Look, I played my whole life, since I was 8 years old or 9 years old, and we played it not year round the way they do now in the youth clubs. Our academy, FC Florida, it goes the whole year, but back then it was like a seasonal sport in the spring, and I play American football in the fall. I would skateboard constantly. I would surf. I would do various things. And when I get into high school, I was at a big public high school, and the football team, the soccer team rather, was, 80% South American. And I learned what the word gringo meant, So I and I just wasn't anywhere near as good as the kids on the team from Colombia and from Brazil and other places. And, I had these great moments in soccer. Then I had some embarrassing moments in soccer, and I was never as good as I wanted to be. I got up to university and I had to pick between the two sports because they played in the fall. So I chose American football because it was the last time I could wear a helmet and pads, and I knew I'd be able to play soccer the rest of my life. And, then you have kids, and then you get more into it, and you're like every dad, your frustrations of not being as good as you wanted to be, or now seeing it, whoa, my kids are great, right? My kids are going to be amazing. But that's, I feel sorry for so many of the families that live here in the United States that don't have real immigration. They're young kids who were brought here illegally to no fault of their own, and they can go to school, but they can't get federal money to go to college. So I was tired of seeing the kids that were growing up with my kids having less opportunity than my kids had, simply because they weren't fully American. And that's why we started this program. And, I have so many young kids that we've helped get into university, and I'm still close to them today. I still stream their games. I watch them in university. The Academy, SC Florida, I drive by it every morning on the way to work, and I see these kids out there training every morning before school, every afternoon after school. So for me, it was about academy. It was about youth football, and it still is today.
And when you arrived at Botafogo, and after the whole business operation happened, what were your impressions? I mean, it must be a shock for someone who is used to the business culture in America and all the markets you've been into, and special effects and movie making. And I mean, Brazil it's a tough place to do business, and Botafogo was already recovering, but you had a lot of issues. Was there a time that you looked at the club right after you arrived, and you thought to yourself, oh my God, what did I get into? I mean, well, how
I think the thing I did not understand, like my business failure in 2012 was very embarrassing. But I relied on this quote from the legendary basketball coach, John Wooden. And he said, reputation is who people think you are, and character is who you really are. And I got through some very humiliating times in 2012 where I knew I did good things. I built a good business. I was honest. We have these battles in corporate America that sometimes you lose. People are only about money in this context. And so I lost that battle in 2012. It was embarrassing, but I knew that I was a good person. I knew that I had done the right things, and I knew I had built a valuable business. So that gave me really thick skin, because it was a high profile business. So when it succeeds, everybody wants to be your friend. When it fails, you're all over television. Everybody is so happy to see somebody go down, right? That's the way we're built in this world. So I think I was uniquely qualified without knowing it. I think God picked me for a reason to be at Botafogo, because I don't care about what people think if it's not based on fact. I get very bothered when bad information gets out there and I get judged based on dishonesty or misunderstandings, or, you know, there are very good journalists in this world that do their homework, but there are people that just print it as fast as they can print it, right? So that, I'm not entirely comfortable in my own skin quite yet, but because bad information bothers me, it affects my reputation, the reputation of my organization. But the stuff that doesn't bother me, the fans that hate you because you're not putting in enough money, the fans that they love you because you win them a trophy, but like 1 week later they hate you because you traded away their best player, like that stuff does not bother me. I can sit in a stadium and have the entire place boo me, and it does not bother me, because I know I'm doing a good job. I'm putting my heart into it, and I know I'm working for them. And I know that 98% of the fan base appreciates that, even though 2% or 10%, they want to make my life miserable. So I think I'm built for football, because I really, really, really don't care about the stuff that bothers most people. And I think it's because of my failure in the past that I went through all that. And so I didn't know why I was chosen. We have this expression at Botafogo, you're chosen. You really are, you know, and I didn't know it. Maybe you saw, I don't know, this Fortaleza game where I finally realized on the field that night why I had been brought to Brazil, that these people, not just at Botafogo, but in Brazil, and this law, the SAF law, and me, the gringo, like I realized that's why I was there, to show this to the world. And that's why I was so happy for Brazil. This is the very first thing I talked about when we beat PSG. It wasn't about Botafogo. I said, this is so good for Brazil, right? So I just think that I was put in this moment for a reason. And I did not know how big of a club Botafogo was. I mean, I did in terms of scale and history, but I didn't know spiritually, right? I didn't know that so many Flamengo fans were born from parents who were Botafogo fans, you know? I didn't know really, other than Pele, the history of Santos, you know, or Garrincha and Botafogo. Like, I didn't know that stuff when he reached out to me on LinkedIn. I just thought it's a big club. It's a big opportunity. But I didn't realize till that night in Fortaleza, well, in Brazil, but playing Fortaleza, that's kind of when it hit me that I was in something that was much more special and that required more of my effort and my heart. And that's why it's very different than what I have in France or England or Belgium. It's just very, very different.
You could say that from that point onwards, it became a little personal to you. It became...
Yeah. It was an embarrassing moment of crying on national television, but I thought the woman was a radio person. I didn't know there was a camera. So, yeah, I don't just cry, like for no reason, like, but something about all of that just really moved me.
And you talked about how you get angry when misinformation about you is in the press here. And as I looked into your story, I would agree with you that things like, for example, what happened at digital domain was misrepresented here in Brazilian press. I mean, I think most people don't know that after everything was said and done, you yourself, you got a payout from the courts. Because...
Yeah. Well, you know what happens in court here? It happens everywhere probably. Like, you're not allowed under the law to lie about somebody. You're not allowed to speak untruth to damage their reputation. But there's only one place you're allowed to do that. It's in court, in a document sent to a judge that seems backward, right? That should be the place that you're supposed to be the most honest. But in the United States, they have something called litigation immunity. You're allowed to make these crazy claims and call somebody a jerk, a criminal, a fraud. You're allowed protection called litigation immunity under the law if you put it in a court filing and you say, he's a horrible person, I have the right to prove it. And so often that's used as a weapon to beat somebody down into a settlement agreement, or to say it's not going to be worth it. I'm going to destroy you in court, so you might as well pay me. So it is ironic that you're not allowed to lie about somebody at a cocktail party or at their school. You can be sued for that. In Brazil, it's a criminal violation to defame somebody. But you're allowed to do it in one place. You're allowed to do it in court, where you're swearing under oath that what you say is true. But strangely, that's what happens in things like digital domain, because the people say these things not because they want to get money from me. They wanted to get money from the company's insurance policy, because we had an insurance policy of 50 million, and a bunch of lawyers, they know they can persuade an insurance company to pay them. Well, I wouldn't settle. I wouldn't agree. I wouldn't let the insurance company settle. I demanded truth, because I knew the people that had broken the law to take the company down by short selling the stock out in the public market. And in the end, they so badly did not want to go under oath where they would have to admit their wrongs, or I think their crimes. They ended up giving me the technology assets, which I could take forward. They ended up paying me a significant amount of money. But, there are 100 articles about your failure. There are only 2 or 3 articles about what happens at the end, that you were proven to be honest and forthright, and they actually paid me. You're one of the few people that actually looked that up. And
I was surprised because and nobody talked about this. I mean, you look at articles, especially here in Brazil, and they talk about how the business failed, and some of them go beyond that and say things that in my view are excessive.
Well, look, I was supposed to fail a lot, because I was in the high technology, high risk development business, like taking ideas and risking a lot of money, not knowing that they would work. And of the 23 technology investments we made, 13 were successful, which means that 10 failed. So it's if 1/3 of those were successful in the technology space, you make a lot of money. That's the business model. If 2/3 of them fail, you still make a lot of money. So these things do have to be looked at in context when you go into startups, restructurings, turnarounds, technology businesses. The world of invention is high risk and high return, but it's the life of a scientist. If the scientist doesn't fail and keep trying, then the scientific method doesn't lead to innovation, doesn't lead to good outcomes. So it's easy for somebody to pick up your 23 deals and say, look how stupid he was here, right? It's fine. I'm okay with that. It's fair. That technology that I was given in that lawsuit, I turned into the company Pulse Evolution, where we specialized in digital humans. And that led to the evolution of FaceBank and Fubo. And that award that I got, that you read about, where they gave me money and they gave me the technology, that's what led to the $8 billion company, Fubo, which then allowed me to retire and buy these football clubs. So I'd say I kept at it. And even after that business failed, I was able to get the technology, and I built a new business that ended up being much more successful than the old business, because, maybe it's the American way, but this happens all over the world. You just got to keep trying. You just got to get up. And when you get knocked back down, you got to keep going. And, maybe that's why I'm right for Botafogo, because 2023 should have sent me into therapy. I should have quit everything, but we didn't. We had 2024 ahead of us, and that worked out much better.
I'm going to ask you a few things about 2023. Yes, it was. But what I was very surprised about, according to the sources I talked to, how hands-on you are at Botafogo, especially with finding and recruiting players. I was told that you personally convinced Alessandro Brito, the head scout, to come to Botafogo. It was something that you were directly involved in. Is that true? What was?
Yeah. Well, both he and Andre Mizuko, I was speaking with simultaneously, and they had a good relationship. And so the three of us really came together and felt like I call it a brotherly connection, but I'm so much older than them. You have to ask them if they feel the same way, right? But maybe they look at me as a fatherly connection. But yeah, that was like, do you want to be on this journey with me? You know, we've got a great responsibility. And I was introduced to them by, well, I was hearing their names from a few people. And then Dougie Friedman, the sporting director at Crystal Palace, really encouraged me to talk to them. And that's how the relationship developed.
And it was very successful. My pronunciation sometimes is not really that great. It was very successful very quickly. What did you guys do to achieve such success so quickly? I mean, it became a very scientific work with tools, and what people about Botafogo say is that you built some tools in-house that used to be outsourced from other sources.
Yeah, we did.
And that you built this network where the scouting departments of one club would communicate with the other clubs, and that will lead you to finding players and establishing the profiles of those players according to each club inside the Eagle network.
That's true. So I think we're all believers that there are certain things you look for in an athlete where the eyes of a scout see, well, I want a player that's got great first touch, or I want a player that is open to receipt of the ball while being open to the turn and the play, right? Go back and get the ball, be open to receive, have a good first touch, take command of the ball, turn, open up, look, distribute. Like, these are all physical skills that have a measure of time. The reason you want a player with good first touch is that he brings in the ball quickly before the defender's on him, so he has more time to turn and then make a good decision before he has the pressure, right? So somebody like Alessandro Brito will look at a player and he sees good first touch, he sees that his body's open, he sees that he's good technical on the turn, picks his head up, sees his targets, knows where he is on the field. Like, that's the way a scout will break down a player, you know, because Brito has an incredible eye, incredible knowledge of football. Whereas I look at that as components of time. I don't care if he's the smartest player or the most physically gifted player. I care that he receives, turns, distributes in less time than anybody else with great statistical certainty on the completion of the pass and the outcome. So maybe he looks at it with his eyes and I look at it with the math, and these two worlds come together, and the master of time is often the best midfielder. The one with the best, either he's got the best physical skills, or maybe he has bad first touch, but when he turns and he looks, he makes decisions faster. Like, I don't care if he's got perfect physical attributes and it takes him a long time to make a decision, but the whole combination of receipt, turn, and distribute is faster, right? Or if he's slow on the first touch, but he makes decisions very quickly, it's faster, right? Smart, technical, fast. That's what we look for in Botafogo, and we view it with our eyes, and we view it in the numbers, and those worlds come together, and we make good decisions based on that. But what we also do is we trust each other across our different clubs, because one set of eyes can be fooled. Another set of eyes that looks at that same player from a different perspective. Well, yeah, he may be good in Brazil, but would he be good in France? He may be good in Brazil, but would he be good in England? Well, if the guy in Brazil loves him, and the guy in France loves him, and the guy in England loves him, and the guy in Belgium loves him, there's no way they're all four wrong. It's not possible, right? Now, if they get together and they analyze the player together on the same set of variables, well, all four could be wrong. But it's very low probability that four different perspectives with very different ways of looking at a player in different environments and different needs, that they all believe this player is solid, and that it's very unlikely that they're all going to be wrong. And that the data is also going to be wrong at the same time. So yeah, we developed new tools, but we also developed a way of trusting each other. We had a couple of examples early on. I'll stop after this long answer, but we all get together, we talk all the time, right? We don't want to sign a player in Brazil if the other guys don't like him also. And we had a guy that was on one of the WhatsApp groups. He was one of our scouts. I won't tell you which country, right? It wasn't Brazil. But he just started using the F word, like cussing at everybody in the group and like giving them a hard time. And I looked at it. It took me 2 minutes to call him nice kid. I fired him because we saw under a moment of stress who he really was. Not collaborative, right? If you're not collaborative, you don't belong in Eagle football. And if you're not as nice as Alessandro Brito, you don't belong in Eagle football. Right? I mean, so good scouts, good data, good human beings. And we bought the club on March 11th, 2022. Everybody thought we bought it earlier because that's, the way Brazil is, right? As soon as you sign the term sheet, they think you own it. We weren't allowed to pick players until March 11th, 2022. And the season started 4 weeks later. And we only had 3 people that had ever played Serie A. And so Brito and Mizuko in that first year, people may be upset with who we hired because you hired players for the situation. They had to have experience. They had to have been around a lot because we were shooting for the middle of the table. We were mistakenly in the G4 after a few weeks. And everybody said, oh my God, it's going great. Well, we knew we weren't going to finish up there. But Brito and Mizuko, they did an amazing job to get us started with the entire scouting department and people that were also part of it.
People even go as far as to say that when they want to talk to you at Botafogo, the easiest way to find you is to go to Brito's office and you will probably be on the phone with him.
Yes, sir. Yeah, and Leo, our new sporting director, has come in, and he's amazing, right? But I'll just admit publicly that it took a long time for me. I knew I was supposed to call him. He's a wonderful person. He's really smart. But habitually, I'm just always calling Brito. Like, I want to talk about football, I call Brito. I'm like, Mizuko's gone. I would have called Mizuko and Brito. And so I've had to teach myself, like, I got to remember to call Leo because Leo's wonderful. He's important. He's, has a huge role in the organization. But you're right. Habitually, it's Brito I just keep calling all the time.
And would you say you get involved at every single signing for the professional team, or there are a few signings that you simply, trust the scouts and go ahead if you feel like that's a good signing?
Well, Brito he's got 3 levels because, my Portuguese is bad and his English is better than my Portuguese. But, he has these 3 levels. He's like, John, he's, let me see if I can say this. John, he's good. John, he's really good. Or he's fucking good, right? So don't publish that one. But it's I trust him so much that sometimes it's not always about the data. He tells me like for the budget, this guy's perfect. For any budget, this guy's perfect. The trust is this past year. I'd say I was involved in fewer decisions. I do sign off on every player, but I'm now trusting the process much more than I might have in the first year.
So talking about...
and sometimes I have to recruit the player. Sometimes I don't pick the player at all. And it matters when the owner will call the family, or it matters that I flew to Spain and sat in the kitchen of Luis Enrique, as fans have reported. It matters that I get to know the fiance of Thiago Almada. That stuff's important, and people forget that in football. Many owners have forgotten that.
Almada was a signing you were very involved in, right? People say that it was pretty much a John Textor signing. It was something that
probably. I mean, obviously, Brito was aware of the player, knew he's good, but it wasn't on his radar. And I had seen him up in the U.S. He's one of the few really terrific players that I saw in the MLS. So that was an easy one for me to identify.
Going a little bit forward in time to 2023 and the match fixing allegations. And I don't want to talk so much about the allegations per se, but there was a point that you had made a lot of enemies. I mean, you were being sued by Palmeiras and Leila. You were being sued by Edinaldo, the president of the CBF. You were being sued at the sporting courts. And was there a point that you thought to yourself, maybe I went too far, and how am I going to get out of this?
I think that all the time, because I grew up with extreme attention deficit disorder, and you can be very myopic and have blinders on, and you're like a dog chasing a bone. All you see is the bone. You don't see the car that's going to run you over chasing the bone, right? I've been that way my whole life, and most of the time it served me well. But look, what happened to me in Brazil, it happened to me in France recently. My situation in France ultimately had very little to do with the money. It had everything to do with the fact that I was a reformist. The system there is broken in France. The league is falling apart. The federation is fighting to take over the league. The power of the chairman of the DNCG, which is a volunteer job, this financial sustainability guy sets all of his own rules, is taken over football. Like, all of this is wrong. And, there are people in France trying to reform French football to look more like the Premier League, where there's not this volunteer group of people in the DNCG that set different rules for different situations, but it's PSR, it's black and white, it's accounting rules, like same rules for everybody, So I get very worked up about that stuff when I see something is wrong and it's hurting an organization, it's hurting a community, because this is football. And, what I did in Brazil on the match fixing, the same thing I did in France on trying to reform, even advocating for the abolition of the DNCG. Well, that proved to be really stupid when I had to go to the DNCG and ask for a license to stay in the league, which you do every year, right? So that tends to be my personality at times, and more often than not, it served me well. In the case in Brazil, the reason I get along with Leila again is like, she finally figured out, while she was defending her club, she should. I think she finally realized I had never accused her of anything and never thought it was people at Palmeiras. What we have is an epidemic, a pandemic around the world of match manipulation. It occurs in every country, and it's player underperformance by design, whether paid or orchestrated. It's also occasionally referees, a very small percentage. And nobody wants to admit that it happens in their country until they realize it happens everywhere, like doping in cycling. Everybody said, oh, it barely happens, until they realized Lance Armstrong did it, right? So, I think ultimately Leila and I found peace. Edinaldo, we started seeing each other largely because of all these trophies we were collecting. I kept having to shake his hand in front of people. And so once communication opens up, these problems are easier to handle. I will say that the prosecutors ultimately accepted my evidence. The Senate CPI ended up interviewing a man, William Regato. Wow, it was quite amazing when he admitted that he had been involved in fixing games against Botafogo. It was huge press for a couple of weeks, and then nobody talked about it again because people are still embarrassed about it. Then he gets arrested. This man gets arrested in Dubai, and he's now been extradited back to Brazil, and still nobody's talking about it. But at least I know behind the scenes, the people at the CBF, the people in the Senate, like people do care about this issue, and Brazil has done more to clean this up than most other countries have, believe it or not, where nobody's doing anything about it in other parts of the world. So I tried to make the point that Brazil should be proud that it had a Senate CPI, that it did arrest this guy, right? That Senator Portinho, he's not a Botafogo fan, he's a Flamengo fan. But these people kept going to try and clean up the game because they care about Brazil. So it got to the point where I didn't have to fight the fight anymore. And if Brazil is considerably better now than it was in 2022.
But rebuilding those relationships, this is a skill too. And people say you are very good at this. You are very good at establishing relationships with people and coming up with friendly solutions to difficult situations. That's something I heard a lot from a lot of people about you. Would you agree with that? Do you think that?
I don't know. I think I think humility is the most important thing, because like when you're going into discussions, friendly or in battle with other heads of corporations, everybody's smart, right? Every president of every club in Brazil, anywhere, they're all smart people. They didn't get there because they were lucky, you know? And so they are smart. They have egos. They come with hard ideas. Sometimes they're right. Sometimes they're wrong. Same with me. So when you're wrong, you got to be humble about it. You have to own it. You have to apologize. Like, I came out way too hot on Palmeiras because of that particular game, right? And it wasn't an act against Palmeiras, but it comes off that way. And so ultimately, there's quiet time. And Tyro was very good at reaching out to Leila, communicating on my behalf and getting us together. And then, honestly, Botafogo fans don't want to hear this, but we're sitting in the same box in the Club World Cup, and this was the most tense game. We were not playing the way we should play. We were playing on our heels. It bothered me. I was angry. I wanted to take it forward on the front foot. I wanted to beat Palmeiras. But we're in this game, and as upset as I am about the way we're playing, I also knew this was a tense moment for Leila. And even before they scored their goal, like, we were looking at each other and waving and smiling. And I say, "Hey, how you doing, Leila?" Like, in the most tense moment of the game, we were talking. And so people are still human beings. And she got the better of us that day. We gave each other a great hug, and I believe it was genuine,
They call you a friend at this point. I talked to them, to the people at Palmeiras, and they see John Textor is a friend.
That's really nice. That's really nice. It starts with her, right? Because she sends the message. It starts with the coach, Alba Ferreira. It starts in that bad moment where I'm screaming corruption, but I still congratulated the players as they came off the pitch because, it's not them, and we never have to revisit that game. It's because the corruption thing is a global problem. It's not a Brazil problem.
John, I know you're a private person, and if you don't want to answer this and you don't want to talk about it, that's okay. But I wanted to ask you. You have a son that plays football, right? He's a player. I don't know if he's aiming at being a professional.
No. Both of my boys play football, and they both say they're retired, and that's sort of a joke, as if they never really had football careers. So when they say they were retired,
how old are they?
23 and 25.
And do they come to Brazil a lot? Are they at this point huge Botafogo fans, and they go to the matches? how is their relationship with what you do, with your work, and with Botafogo in Brazil?
Well, we all watch the games. They're huge Botafogo fans. They do come to Brazil. Their lives, get in the way a little bit more because young people don't have the freedom to travel and take time off from work quite as easily as we can when we're older. So they never miss a game. They never miss a moment. When we watch games together, we'll watch them in a room with a bunch of friends, and we have like watch parties up here. A lot of the people around me root for Botafogo. I don't really watch the games with them alone on TV because they don't like being around me. And then I used to be easygoing watching these games, and I've become a karaoke, right? And so it's like now I'm angry at the screen, or I'm like emotional, and it's but yeah, we watch every game. We stay in touch by text. One of them's in New York now. The other lives in Florida. And we get together as much as we can, of course. But yeah, they don't play anymore. Well, that's not true. They play in leagues, like adult leagues, but
like amateur leagues, and
yeah, just to keep fit and to enjoy football.
Going back a little to Botafogo, and I'm going to go towards the end of our conversation because we have been already speaking for almost an hour. Yeah. Huge success came and the Libertadores. And what would you say was the absolute highest point of the whole experience for you at the moment? I mean, the best moment you experienced at Botafogo so far?
Junior Santos in the corner, escapes from the corner, scores. Never seen anything like that in my life. Because that game, it was so obvious that they were going to beat us just because they had the man advantage. Our legs were gone. It was shot after shot after shot. Like, there's nothing worse. I've said this so many times before that game. Everybody in my academy knows this. Every young kid that's ever heard me talk. The worst score in football is 2-1 when you were the team leading 2-0. So think about what that means. When you're up 2-0, you should win. You don't normally do that with 10 men. When you're up 2-0, you've had chances to go up 3-0, right? And then when that first goal comes in, it's 2-1. There's an emotional letdown that has as much to do with the opportunities you missed to go to 3 goals. But now, instead of a 3-goal spread, there's a 1-goal spread. That's the worst moment in football. And you see it happen again and again in every game. And so for that to be my personal thing that's always in my head for many years, and to see that situation playing out where they scored early coming out of the half, and I just said to my friends and my family that it's too early. It's too early. It happened too fast. Like, we needed to get to the 75th minute or something because our legs are gone. We're done. This team is too good. This is not a red card deficit against a bad team. This is a finalist they were playing. So I can't believe what happened with that moment. And when Junior scored, and aside from the usual important moments in the life of your family, that is one of the single greatest moments of my life when that happened, because something about our crowd that day, we never went negative. We have a tendency to go negative when we're losing opportunity, and that red card, the lost moment, the lost final that was about to happen, we were going to lose, that still nobody gave up, and the fan base stayed with us. And when Junior hit that goal in, I don't know. I mean, it's the greatest moment that I can remember in recent history for me.
Yeah, Brazilian fans are very volatile and they are very impatient. I mean, whenever a Brazilian team or club wins a huge championship, there is always a rebuilding phase after that. And Botafogo is sort of at this rebuilding phase, but sometimes the fans they lack patience. And do you think that the work you are doing at rebuilding, together with this crisis from the fight at Eagle, is this increasing the pressure on you? Do you feel like people are lacking patience to wait for Botafogo to be not restructured, but
yeah, I mean, look, I think I would never laugh at our fans, right? But I do think some of the criticism is a bit silly. Let me explain why. And I want to talk about the reasons the next year can be so tough after a championship, right? We saw it with Fluminense just a couple of years ago. But I mean, look, here we are, we're in 5th or 6th place. We are a team that won a championship with some really good decisions, some really good planning. We recovered from the most incredibly difficult year of 2023, the greatest start in the history of football, the greatest collapse in the history of football, all in one. If I spent time listening to the fans, I would have terminated the contract of Marlon Freitas immediately at the end of the 2023 season. Yet that same man becomes maybe the most important figure, in the locker room, building up the confidence of this team to go out and win that title. So I think fans have to take ownership of their volatility of thought. And Marlon Freitas is a perfect embodiment of this idea. I mean, if I listen to the supporters, Marlon would be the first to have been cut at the end of 2023. I never knew, as they were booing him at the end of the season, why they were booing him, but they were very hard on him in 2023. And I would ask, what is the problem? Well, it's literally a couple of bad plays and a couple of key moments that the fans remember, and suddenly they lose patience with an athlete and they want him gone. Well, thank God we kept him, and thank God he wanted to stay. So I think I have perspective on this, and I think I have patience with the fans, and I hope they have patience with me. But now let's talk about specifics. Number one, some of the smartest journalists ask me the same question all the time. They said, well, John, don't you think it was really bad planning what happened this year? Well, it's not bad planning to lose your coach when your coach blows up his personal life right in the middle of the season, decides he wants to go, makes up a story that he wants to stay when you know he's already going, and you've lost your coach even before the season ends, before the championship happened. We knew we were going to lose him. And so the fans are like, John, you got to do better. You got to keep him. Well, we now have learned a lot about the reasons he's gone, and there wasn't a way to keep him. So now you have a club. I have never said this publicly. I said this to one YouTuber privately just the other day. I couldn't say it at the time we were going through it. Like, why didn't you get a coach? Why did you take so long, John? Why did it take so long to get a coach? I will tell you this, nobody wanted the job. And I couldn't say it publicly because that would have been damaging to Botafogo, the club, the brand, our spirit, our sense of pride. But people know Brazil, right? Nobody wants to take that job right after you've won Brazil, won Copa Libertadores, the best year in 120 years. That is a high-risk job, especially in Brazil. Because look at what we've done. We've turned desperation of our fans into greed, and I like that they expect to win now. Somebody asked me the other day internally in a meeting, they said, John, we need to lower the expectations of our fans. I'm like, no, we don't. We now have a club where we all expect to win. I said it after the loss at Vasco. We have changed this club into one of high expectations. We expect to beat Palmeiras. We expect to beat Flamengo. We expect to win everything. And I love that. But we've now created a new kind of pain where it's not the pain of seeing Botafogo lose in these unimaginable ways where it only happens to Botafogo. We've now created the pain of higher expectations because when we get knocked out of Copa do Brazil, we cannot believe it, right? So I would rather be a part of that organization. But I'll tell you, people know that that's tough in Brazil. Nobody wanted this job. I couldn't talk anybody into a coach. You may have heard maybe that I'm a somewhat persuasive guy at times. Well, I couldn't persuade anybody on the project. One after another. Tite, Tata Martino, Rafa Benitez, like you name it. The first one, my first choice, only because he so wanted the job. He said yes to the job. Is Andre Jardine up in Mexico, wanted to come back to Brazil. Well, then he says, well, I never wanted the job. That's because his owner shows up in Mexico, gives him a bunch of money, and he says, I'm good here in Mexico, right? I couldn't get anybody to take the job. So I will freely admit now, it was never bad planning. It was just failure of execution that I was not able to hire a coach. It's not bad planning. It's failure, right? So now here we are. I still agree with what I said. The season for me starts in April. If you're lucky enough to have the Super Cup or Recopa, whatever, but you need to use the preseason to plan and to play young people. You can't play these people 11 months a year with high intensity and win everything. That's not possible. But I'm sorry to go on and on and on, but like I think we're doing fine. I'm sorry it upsets people to hear that, but the other thing that happened is fans know this. Look at the beginning of the year. Many of the players that you love from the championship year, they want to leave the next year because they say, hey, I've done as much as I can possibly do here in Brazil at Botafogo. I'm at the end of my career. I need to go make money in Qatar. Or I'm getting towards my last opportunity to go to Europe, my last chance to go to Europe. I need to go to Europe. I've given everything I can for Botafogo. I've won a championship. I need to take care of my family. And then there's a lack of motivation, a lack of energy. Like some of the same players that won that championship for us the year before, if you looked at their numbers running, they're running at a level of 85% what they were running just the year before when we won the championship. Everybody's motivation is down. Only the great organizations that have been great for a number of years, like Palmeiras, with an incredible academy, they've been doing it well for a long time. Like they figured out how to win and be ready again, right? And for me, it's a learning experience. For our players, it's a learning experience. I'm not making excuses. I'm just saying it's hard, and it's taken us the whole year to start playing better. And we're still losing games where we play better. But yeah.
It happens everywhere. I mean, if you look at Flamengo after 2019, they went through this. They took a long time to get back, and with the same players, the players were underperforming a lot. And it usually happens after you win big things and like what happened at Botafogo. Yes.
Well, people are asking about our coach right now. Our coach is spectacular, and I talked to him. And one of the places where he's really, where we are really struggling is getting consistent performances out of our best players. Like from game to game, our best players are either here or they're here. And he has to pick a squad, every game. And I think he's still dealing with some players that have the hangover from 2024. Or we just got through a transfer window. Some wanted to leave, some decided to stay. I mean, yeah, it's been a tough year, but I'm not going to apologize for a year where we're in 5th or 6th place, and I'm highly confident we're going to be in the G4, and we're going to be back at Copa Libertadores. Very upset about not getting any of these tournament cups. I'm very upset about that, but we have 17 games left in the season. That's a lot of fun, a lot of excitement we have left to go.
I was told a story about you that when at the presentation of Renato Paiva, you asked an employee from Botafogo to go fetch the trophies and to put them on the table right at the end of the interview. And you allegedly told, this is who we are now. We are the current champions. And, people should mind that when criticizing and when talking about. And then you had the trophies, displayed. Is that true? Is that what really happened?
Yeah. Well, I think it ended up getting photographed. But yeah, I didn't like the questions. We were so fresh off of our championship. I didn't like the defeatist attitude, around the club, even among supporters of the club. And look, you're champions until somebody wins the next trophy. You're champions. You're king of the hill until somebody knocks you off of the hill. And at that point in time, we still had a lot of talent on that squad. We had lost a couple of key players, but we also had some new young players that we were excited about. And I did that for two reasons. I wanted to send a message to the world that, we're still king of the hill until you knock us off. And I wanted to send a message to my coach, I have an expectation of you, coach, at the highest level of Brazil. I didn't bring you in to sort of develop your career and, have a decent run. I brought you in to win another trophy. So I was sending a message to the public. I was sending a message to our supporters. I was sending a message to our coach that we expect to be champions every year for the rest of our lives.
To wrap this up, I'm going to ask you, and it's up to you how much into it you get, but this whole thing happening right now with Eagle and Botafogo, what's your take in it? And I mean, are the financial problems a real issue? You've been very vocal in our conversations telling me that, in your view, things are solved or very close to being solved. What would you say to the fans and, generally just your take in what's happening?
Well, I'd say that people need to understand that Botafogo, the club, has been doing well financially, and our revenues have increased from 20 million US dollars when we started this thing in 2022 to well over 200 million US dollars this year. It'll be closer to maybe 240 million US dollars. The operating cash flow, the operating profit of the organization is also very, very high. But I think our fans now know that as a larger organization, we share cash between all the clubs, and we collaborate not only on football, but also on finances. And what the DNCG did, this financial watchdog in France, is they made it very difficult for France to collaborate at a time when a lot of money had flowed into France, as it would seasonally, because Botafogo was doing better than France was in terms of revenues and profitability. And then the DNCG then puts rules in place. This is not Michel Kang's fault. This is not anybody's fault. I think it's a horribly broken method of sustainability review in France. Because that Lyon club had just passed through the UEFA sustainability review, which is quite onerous and quite demanding. And so how is it that UEFA can say you're okay to play in Europa League, but the DNCG can say the same numbers aren't good enough for France? So what they did was they took a red pen and they struck through proven cash flows of money that was flowing from Botafogo or elsewhere in Eagle into France. And they said, that doesn't count. We're not going to give you credit for that. They took player sales, which are at 100 million a year in France, and they struck a red pen through that, said that doesn't count. And if you just start throwing out revenues from the projections, reliable revenues or reliable cash flow in France, you can make any club look like it's not sustainable. And so when they did that, that means that OL needs to operate as a standalone club. It needs to hoard or keep its cash. And the cash sharing that goes back and forth between the clubs has to end at that point. Now, what does that mean? That means that Botafogo and OL have to negotiate with each other as if they're independent clubs. And the reason is that each one of those clubs has minority investors. So the French club is a publicly traded company with thousands of shareholders that have nothing to do with Eagle. We may own 90+% of it, but there are 6,000 other shareholders. So Lyon is now operating as a standalone club. Botafogo, which has a minority partner in the social club, has to operate as a standalone club. And that was forced not by the decisions of Michel Kang or not by Aries or not by, but by the French regulators. So we then have to act as a board at Botafogo, and I'm a board member at Botafogo, even though I'm also the majority holder of Eagle. Those are two different hats, as they say. So I have to vote as a board member of Botafogo. Okay, now, how are we going to bring money into this club, this very successful, upwardly trending club? Well, we have to authorize shares, to potentially issue equity, to raise capital, to do it by bringing in equity, maybe by debt. Now, Eagle has the first option to be that investor under the documents, and Eagle will continue to support Botafogo. But the fight that people see played out in court was about authorizing new methods of bringing money in. And people got confused. They said, well, John did that in the name of Eagle Cayman. That's his company. Well, that's not true. It has never been true. Eagle Cayman, which is called Eagle Football Group in the Cayman Islands, it was formed in 2024 for all of the interest of Eagle to be consolidated into that one Cayman entity for the initial public offering on the New York Stock Exchange. So when I was creating these new instruments to raise money for Botafogo, I did it in the name of Eagle Football Group in the Cayman Islands, which the lawyers for Aries and the lawyers for the new independent director, they didn't even understand. So it was all an incredible misunderstanding about the mechanisms by which Botafogo needs to be able to act independently to continue to grow. So things calmed down. Several weeks passed. They went to court. The judge didn't give them their injunction to stop us, but ultimately just negotiating with my fellow shareholders, the dispute about how to finance Botafogo, we're not going to do it through those instruments. Eagle is still the 90% owner. The social club does not have to worry about Eagle supporting Botafogo. And there will always be shareholder discussions about who puts money in. Does Textor write a check? Does Aries write a check? Does Michelle write it? But these are investments that go into Eagle that would then flow down to Botafogo the way they always have. So if people trusted me to take this from second division to first division and win a championship, I actually got 98.5% of the vote, the support of the members of the social club before they even knew me. Well, now here I've won this trophy and we are a nominee for top 5 clubs in the world at the Ballon d'Or, and I'd be lucky to get 60% of the social club vote today, right? So, kind of funny how things have changed, but I think people are adjusting to a new world where Eagle Football may be the owner, but some of the multi-club collaboration we have on cash has had to change a bit because of the changes in France, and we're all adjusting to it. Now, I will tell you, just to go on record, I ended the dispute last week with agreement with Christopher Mallon, the independent director, and he asked me to unilaterally, because it was the quickest way to do it, to sign everything I needed to do to end that dispute in court. The communication internally was not great, and some of the attorneys that even represent him went into court and said, wait a minute, John's not allowed to do that. Well, we told them last night and today, you should really call Chris because he and I did this together. So yeah, things are still, you know, the dispute as to how we fund Botafogo. Eagle will support Botafogo. Is it true that Eagle would like more representation from maybe Aries or elsewhere on the board of Botafogo? Look, they've been invited to join the board of Botafogo. Aries has been invited to join the board of Botafogo. I don't know which. They've always had the right to be on the board, but you know the history. We haven't seen a lot of Eagle shareholders going to games, and we haven't seen Aries. But you know, we've been inviting them to become more involved. Will this affect my autonomy? I never had autonomy. Like I had a board I respond to. I mean, I may be the majority owner, but I report to the board of Eagle. It just seems like I have autonomy because a lot of the Eagle shareholders haven't gotten that involved down in Brazil. But, you know, I don't expect too much to change. You know, it's Michelle's running France and I'm running Brazil, and I'm happy, you know, the way that works for now.
Whoa.